My name is Claire Matthews, and until 2 years ago, I thought I had the perfect marriage. Ethan and I had been together for 7 years. College sweethearts turned business partners, lovers turned dreamers. We ran a small interior design firm in Chicago, and we built everything from scratch: our house, our careers, our life. At least, that's what I believed. People often say, you never truly know someone until you see how they act when no one's watching. I used to laugh that off, but now it haunts me because I saw who Ethan really was when no one was watching, and it destroyed me. It all started one quiet Thursday evening. I came home early from a client meeting, carrying takeout and a bottle of wine. Ethan was supposed to be working late, so I wanted to surprise him. But as I opened the door, I heard laughter, soft, intimate laughter from the living room. At first, I thought he was on a video call with one of our clients. But then I heard a woman's voice, a familiar one. Ethan, stop. Someone might come in. My heart skipped. I froze in the doorway, my hands trembling. That voice belonged to Amber, our new design assistant, the same woman I had hired just a month earlier. I don't even remember walking into the living room. My body moved before my mind caught up. And there they were, Ethan and Amber, tangled up on the couch, his hand on her waist, hers on his cheek, like they'd done this 100 times before. Amber gasped when she saw me. Ethan jumped up, trying to say something, but I couldn't hear. The sound around me faded, like I was underwater. The only thing I remember saying was, "Get out." And they did, together. That night, I sat on the cold floor of my living room, surrounded by everything we'd built: pictures of our wedding, our business plans pinned to the corkboard, our dreams stacked neatly in binders. And all I could think was, how long? How long had this been happening behind my back? The days that followed were a blur. Ethan didn't come home. He didn't even try to explain. Instead, I got a short text 2 days later. "I'm sorry, Claire. I didn't mean for it to happen. I'm moving out for a while. Please don't make this harder than it needs to be." That was it. 7 years of love, reduced to a text message. I tried to keep the business going on my own, but clients started pulling out. Rumors spread fast in our industry, and soon, everyone knew Ethan had left me for Amber. They flaunted their relationship online, posting pictures at restaurants, laughing, kissing, pretending they were some kind of fairy tale couple. And me? I became the woman people pitied, the poor wife who got replaced. I remember walking into a coffee shop one morning and overhearing two of our former clients whispering, "Did you see her? That's Claire Matthews, the one Ethan left for his assistant." Yeah, such a shame. She used to be so put together. I wanted to scream, but instead, I smiled, ordered my coffee, and walked out. Because even in that moment of humiliation, a strange thought crossed my mind. If I ever get back up, they won't see it coming. 6 months passed. Ethan and Amber got engaged. I found out through social media, of course. A picture of a sparkling diamond ring with a caption, "Forever starts now." I deleted my accounts that same day. I spent the next year rebuilding myself. I sold the house, shut down the firm, and moved to a small town near Lake Michigan. I needed to disappear, to find out who I was without Ethan. I started freelancing, taking design jobs quietly under a new business name. And surprisingly, it worked. My clients didn't know my story. They only knew my work. Slowly, I began to breathe again. But then, one morning, as I was sipping coffee by the lake, my phone buzzed. It was an email from Ethan. "Claire, I know it's been a long time, but I was wondering if you'd be open to meeting. I could really use your expertise on a new project. It's a big one, and I trust your skills more than anyone's." Ethan. For a long time, I just stared at the screen. My hands started shaking, not with sadness this time, but with something sharper, something that tasted like vengeance. He wanted my help after leaving me for his assistant, after humiliating me in front of everyone we knew. That day, a part of me that had been quiet for too long finally woke up. I had rebuilt myself, yes, but now I was ready to take something back. I replied, short and professional. Of course, Ethan. Let's discuss it. When and where? 2 weeks later, I walked into the glass-walled conference room of his new company, E&A Designs. The same initials we once shared, except now the A stood for Amber. She was there too, wearing a white suit, looking smug, as if she'd won the ultimate prize. Ethan stood beside her, slightly older, but still charming. Claire, he said, smiling faintly, it's really good to see you. Is it? I replied coolly, because I wasn't sure you'd ever look me in the eye again. Amber's smirk faltered, but Ethan tried to smooth things over. Let's keep this professional. We've got a major client coming in, and I need the best designer on it. You're still the best, Claire. Something about his confidence made my blood boil, but I hid it well. I smiled. Of course. I'll make sure it's perfect. As the meeting went on, I played my part, the calm, capable ex-wife. I took notes, asked questions, and kept my face neutral. But inside, I was mapping every detail, how their company worked, who their investors were, and where their weaknesses lay. Because this wasn't just business. This was my re-entry. And Ethan, he had no idea the storm he had just invited back into his life. That night, as I drove home, I looked at my reflection in the mirror and whispered, "You took everything from me, Ethan. Now, it's my turn." I smiled, slowly, deliberately, as a plan began to form. A plan he could never escape. When Ethan called me the next morning, asking if I could come to dinner with him and Amber to catch up, I didn't hesitate, because little did he know, dinner was exactly where his downfall would begin. The following evening, I stood outside Ethan's modern penthouse apartment, the one he now shared with Amber. The building was sleek, expensive, and far removed from the cozy little house we once called home. Everything about it screamed new life, new love, new success. But as I stared up at the shimmering glass windows, I couldn't help but think that success was built on my sweat, my ideas, and my sacrifice. He didn't build this from nothing. He built it from me. When the elevator doors opened to their floor, Amber greeted me with a polite, rehearsed smile. Her lips said, "Welcome," but her eyes said, "What are you doing here?" "Claire," she said, voice sugary sweet. "You look different." "Better, I hope," I replied with a calm smile. Ethan appeared behind her, holding a glass of wine. "You really do, Claire. I mean it. It's good to see you again." I took the glass he offered, forcing a pleasant expression. "Well, thank you for having me." The three of us sat down for dinner. At first, it was all polite chatter, business updates, design trends, harmless small talk. But underneath the surface, there was tension thick enough to cut through with a knife. Amber clung to Ethan's arm every time I spoke, as if to remind me he was hers now. Ethan tried to keep the peace, but he was clearly uncomfortable. I could see the flicker of guilt in his eyes whenever our gazes met. I leaned back, watching them play, happy couple. "So," I said casually, "how's the new company going?" Ethan perked up. "Really well. We just landed a major investor from New York. That's actually what I wanted to talk to you about. The client wants a full redesign of their flagship offices. They were specifically asking for something classic yet bold. I thought of you immediately." Amber's jaw tightened. She looked at him sharply. "You mean we could handle it?" He gave her a tight smile. "Of course. But Claire's vision, you know how good she is." Her expression soured. "Right." I couldn't help the faint smirk that tugged at my lips. Amber was territorial, insecure, and that made her predictable. "Relax, Amber," I said gently. I'm not here to steal your spotlight. I'm here to help. Her tone turned frosty. You already did that once before. For a second, the air went still. Ethan's fork froze halfway to his mouth. My heart thudded. Then I smiled sweetly. Actually, I think it was the other way around, wasn't it? Amber went pale. Ethan cleared his throat awkwardly. Let's not do this. Not tonight. I set my glass down and leaned forward slightly. No, Ethan. Maybe we should. I think it's healthy to talk about what really happened. Amber pushed back her chair. You know what? I'm not hungry anymore. She stormed off toward the kitchen, muttering something under her breath. I turned to Ethan. Still the same old Amber, runs when things get uncomfortable. He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. Claire, I didn't invite you here for drama. I genuinely need your help. This deal is huge for us. If it goes through, it'll take the company to the next level. I studied him for a moment. And what's in it for me, Ethan? He hesitated. A partnership, temporary, of course. 50-50 on the project. You'll have full creative control. I'll handle the investors. I laughed softly. You're offering me the same deal we used to have before you replaced me. He winced. That's not fair. Neither was what you did. There was silence. Then, softer, he said, I know. I was stupid, Claire. I've regretted it every day since. I tilted my head. Oh, please. Don't do that. You got the life you wanted, didn't you? He didn't answer. But the way his eyes softened told me everything I needed to know. Regret, guilt, nostalgia. All the emotions that made men weak. Perfect. After dinner, Ethan insisted on walking me to the elevator. Amber stayed behind, clearly fuming. As we waited for the elevator to arrive, he said quietly, You know, you've changed. You're colder, harder. I met his eyes. You made me that way. For a brief second, he looked like he might say something, maybe apologize again, but the elevator doors opened, and the moment was gone. As I stepped inside, I turned and said, Send me the client details tomorrow. I'll get started. Thank you, Claire, he said softly. Really? I gave him one last smile. You'll get what's coming to you, Ethan. He smiled faintly, not realizing the weight of my words. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake in my apartment, staring at the ceiling, replaying the dinner in my mind. Ethan's tone, Amber's expression, their tension. They weren't as solid as they wanted the world to believe. There were cracks, small ones, but I saw them, and I knew exactly how to make them bigger. The next morning, I received the project brief. I spent hours studying every detail, their investors, contracts, and company structure. Ethan had given me access to files he shouldn't have. He trusted me. Big mistake. I discovered something interesting. Their New York investor wasn't confirmed yet. The deal was still pending. If the project failed or the investor pulled out, E&A Designs would collapse financially. I sat back, staring at the document, feeling a dangerous thrill spread through me. This was it. The opening I needed. I could destroy Ethan's company from the inside, quietly, methodically, and no one would suspect a thing. I'd make it look like his golden girl, Amber, was the one who ruined everything. And when the dust settled, I'd be there, smiling, untouched, free. 2 weeks later, I was officially back in Ethan's office, working side by side with him again. The tension between Amber and me was suffocating. Every time I walked into the room, she bristled. She knew I wasn't just there for business. And she was right. One afternoon, while she was out at a supplier meeting, Ethan and I were finalizing the investor presentation. Our hands brushed accidentally as we reached for the same document. He froze. So did I. It was a familiar electricity, one I hadn't felt in years. Claire, he murmured, his voice low. I've missed this. Us. The way we used to work together. I looked at him. forcing a calm smile even though my heart was racing. Careful, Ethan. Your fiancé might not like hearing that. He hesitated, his gaze dropping. She's not you. I felt a pang, a dangerous one. But I pushed it down. No, she's not, I whispered. And that's exactly why this is going to be so easy. He frowned. What do you mean? I smiled slowly. You'll find out soon enough. That night, I sent an anonymous email, one that would set everything in motion. By morning, Ethan's company would be one step closer to falling apart, and he wouldn't even know who pulled the trigger. When I hit send on that anonymous email, I didn't sleep. I paced my tiny apartment until the sun came up, picturing the slow little cracks I'd watched grow at dinner becoming earthquakes. I'd been careful, every word clipped, every accusation phrased as a neutral tip to the investor's compliance team. I didn't want to be traced back. I wanted the panic to look like it came from a concerned third party, someone who had noticed irregularities and decided to do the right thing. By lunchtime, my phone buzzed with a notification, a breaking headline from a city business feed. My heart lurched as I read it. Potential irregularities prompt investor to delay funding for E&A Designs, due diligence launched. My stomach dropped. It was working. Ethan texted me that afternoon, sounding composed but terse. Claire, we got flagged. It's nothing. I'll handle it. Don't worry the clients. He sounded like the man from before, confident to the point of arrogance. That arrogance was part of what I intended to strip away. The next week was chaos. There were urgent calls, conference rooms filled with stern-faced lawyers, and a procession of auditors crawling through every file and invoice at E&A. Amber looked like a statue, cold, composed. Ethan stayed by her side almost constantly, never leaving the office, pale and tight-lipped. I moved like a ghost through the building, working my role with surgical calm. To the team, I was the savior designer who'd stepped back in to save the project. To Ethan, I was the enigmatic ex who kept her cards close to her chest. To Amber, apparently, I was a living nightmare. 2 days into the audit, the compliance officer asked to speak with me privately. She was younger than I expected, efficient and direct. We found some suspicious payments, she said, sliding a printed bank record across the table. Transfers to a shell company under the name M. Harrow. Several invoices were approved by a senior manager. We need to know who approved these. My pulse steadied. Show me the invoices, I said, keeping my voice level. She did. They were for materials never ordered, for consulting fees that made no sense, routed through strange suppliers. The invoices had been stamped and signed by someone with access to the company's financial system, someone at the top. I recognized the signature before she said it aloud. Ethan's, she said. A cold thing lodged in my chest. I had assumed he'd only betrayed me with his body and promises. I hadn't imagined he'd betrayed me with our work, our name, our livelihood. He not only walked away, he had been quietly carving me out of the thing we built. That evening, after a long day of questioning and denials, I cornered him in his office. The city lights poured through the glass, painting his face in blues and golds. Why? I asked. It was more a sound than a question. He looked exhausted, the kind of raw tired that comes from keeping a lie alive. Claire, it's complicated, he said. I didn't want to hurt you. You didn't want to hurt me. But you funneled company funds to a shell corporation that paid for Amber's apartment and flights, and signed off on fake invoices? My voice rose before I could stop it. You call that not hurting me? He flinched like I'd struck him. I tried to protect us, I thought. He stopped. Protect us, I echoed. From what? From you? He ran a hand over his face. She said she would leave if I didn't help her. He stopped again, and for the first time his composure broke. I didn't know she'd take everything. I felt something inside me split. Betrayal sharpened into a terrible clarity. This wasn't just a fling or a selfish abandonment. He'd been actively removing me from my own life in the quietest, most cowardly way possible. He had helped Amber buy her new life with our money. You signed away my designs, Ethan, I said, my voice steady now, cold and precise. I found the transfer of intellectual property files to a new company name. You made it legal. You made my work Amber's. He went pale. Claire, no, listen. I thought I could fix it later. Fix it. I laughed, a sound with no humor. You fix it by turning my name into a footnote on your marketing sheets. My hands trembled so badly I had to bite the inside of my cheek to stop crying. Do you realize what you've done? He covered his face with his hands. I'm sorry. I've been trying to make it right. The investor is panicking, and if we lose them, you think an apology will fix this? I asked. There are contracts, Ethan. There are signatures. There are bank transfers and invoices. You don't get to apologize away the theft. He looked up at me then, all pleading. Claire, don't do anything crazy. I love Amber. I made mistakes, but I'm trying to save the company. Please? He had the nerve to say he loved her. I left before I let the rest of the words out. I sat in my car for a long time, hands on the steering wheel, thinking. 1,000 little plans I'd been crafting fell into a cleaner shape. This was bigger than revenge. This was about justice, not for public humiliation, not just for pride, but for the fact that my life's work was being stolen and repackaged by the man who promised forever. That night, the entire team gathered for an emergency meeting called by the investor's due diligence leader. They weren't satisfied by Ethan's explanations. They wanted proof of ownership of creative assets, contracts, and clear ledgers explaining the dubious payments. I had the proof. A year ago, before the split, I'd kept secure backups of design assets, emails, and drafts, the intellectual fingerprints that showed these designs were mine. I'd swore I'd never need them. But now I opened the folder on my laptop and felt a fierce, terrible relief. The next morning, with a hand that didn't shake, I put copies of the design files, timestamps, and email threads into a sealed folder and walked into the investor meeting. The conference room was full of faces I'd once trusted. Amber sat at the front, her posture perfect, but her fingers were twining and untwining on the table. When I placed the folder in front of the lead investigator and said, "This proves ownership. Everything here traces back to me," the room shifted. There was an audible intake of breath, then a flurry of questions. Amber's face drained of color. Ethan opened his mouth, then closed it. The investigator leafed through the documents, eyes flicking to dates, to metadata, to the transfer logs. Each page was a nail. "Why didn't you come to us earlier?" the investigator asked pointedly. "This is why I didn't," Ethan stammered. "She left. She left you for Amber," I said, finishing for him. "And then you started signing away what I built." Amber stood, voice shaking. "That's not true. Ethan did this to protect the company from. You transferred funds to a company belonging to Amber's cousin," the investigator said. He looked straight at Ethan. "We traced the account. The payments were authorized by a company password that only senior management had access to." Ethan's cheeks reddened. You used your authority to approve payments that funded Amber's lifestyle," I said, the words tasting like acid. "You signed IP transfer documents that removed my name from our most successful projects. You built her life on theft." Amber lurched like I had slapped her. "That's a lie." "Save it," I said. I felt the old, raw hurt rise up again, but now it was braided with something fiercer. "You don't get to pull the sympathy card. You took what wasn't yours." The investor sat back, fingers steepled. "This is serious. We can't proceed under these circumstances. There's a potential fraud investigation. Our funding is on hold indefinitely." Amber's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Ethan made a sound I'd never heard from him before, The sound of someone finally realizing the full measure of their choices. It was worse than I'd hoped, not because I wanted them to suffer, but because it exposed what I had always suspected. Ethan hadn't just betrayed me in bed. He'd betrayed me in the only places that could never be repaired by apologies. As people began to stand and argue, Amber darted a look at me, something that was equal parts rage and fear. Her eyes said, "You started this. I'll destroy you for it." I met her gaze, calm and cold. "You already did," I said softly. "You destroyed us. I'm just collecting what's left." But then Amber stepped forward and slammed a folder down on the table, one I had not seen before, containing an email thread that, if real, would prove I wasn't the innocent victim at all. And as the lead investigator read the first line aloud, the color drained from my face. The moment Amber slammed that folder onto the table, the air in the room changed. The murmur of voices died instantly, replaced by a thick, electric silence. "This," she said with a trembling voice that somehow carried authority, "proves that Claire isn't the innocent designer she claims to be." My heartbeat pounded in my ears as the lead investigator opened the folder. He flipped through a few pages, his brows furrowing. Amber continued, her tone gaining confidence. "These are emails between Claire and a representative from our competitor Riverside Interiors. She offered to sell them E&A's design proposals before the investor even approved the project. She's been sabotaging us from the start." The words hit me like a slap. "What?" I blurted out. "That's ridiculous." But Amber was already stepping closer, her hands dramatically shaking as she gestured toward the pages. "She's the one who leaked our client pitch to the media last week. She wanted this company to fail so she could watch Ethan lose everything." The investigator's expression was unreadable. He turned the folder toward me. "R.S. Matthews, is this your email address?" I looked down and froze. It was my old business email, the same one Ethan and I used before the split. But I knew immediately that the emails were forged. The formatting was wrong, the tone wasn't mine, and the signature line, "Claire M., co-founder, E&A Designs," wasn't even the way I signed my name. But to someone outside, it looked real enough. "This is fake," I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. "I've never contacted Riverside Interiors in my life." Amber crossed her arms, smirking slightly. "Funny, because they confirmed the correspondence when we asked." Ethan's head snapped toward her. "Amber, what are you talking about? When did you?" "I was protecting us," she interrupted sharply. "When you brought her back, I knew something wasn't right. She's been acting suspicious since day one. So I checked." Ethan looked torn between disbelief and confusion. "Claire would never." I interrupted him. "Don't. You don't get to defend me now." I turned to Amber. "You're lying. You forged those emails." "Prove it," she shot back. And that was the problem. I couldn't. Not right now. The company's servers were under audit. My access was limited, and any backup I had was on encrypted drives back home. Amber had chosen her timing perfectly. The investigator closed the folder, his tone cool. "We'll verify the authenticity. Until then, I'm recommending the investor suspend all dealings with both parties. This is too unstable." And just like that, it was over. The meeting dissolved into chaos, voices rising, accusations flying, Amber playing the victim with perfect tears. Ethan tried to calm everyone, but no one was listening. Within an hour, the investors had walked out, muttering about legal teams and lawsuits. When the room finally cleared, only 3 of us were left. Me, Ethan, and Amber. Amber stood by the window, arms folded, looking triumphant. "I told you bringing her back was a mistake." I took a step forward. "You really went all the way, didn't you? Forged documents, fake correspondence, slander." Her smirk didn't waver. "You think I'd let you destroy everything I've worked for? I earned this, Claire. You're just a bitter ex who couldn't move on. I laughed softly, a dangerous, humorless sound. You didn't earn anything, Amber. You seduced your way into a company, stole ideas that weren't yours, and called it success. But here's the thing about thieves. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. They always leave fingerprints. For the first time, her smirk faltered. I turned to leave, but Ethan grabbed my arm. Claire, wait. I looked at him, my anger barely contained. What? I don't believe her, he said quietly. You wouldn't do that. But the investor, he's already cutting ties. We were finished. I stared at him. We. He looked down. You might have come here to destroy me, but Amber just destroyed us. I pulled my arm free. No, Ethan. You destroyed yourself the moment you chose her. And I walked out. That night, I sat in my apartment surrounded by folders, hard drives, and notes. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but fury. Amber had beaten me at my own game, temporarily. She turned the narrative against me, made me look like the villain. But she had made one mistake. She underestimated how much I knew. I dug into my archives, old backups, project files, email threads from years ago. And then, I found it. A folder Ethan had once created called Vendor References. Inside were dozens of scanned invoices, supplier statements, and emails, one of which was from a company owned by Amber's cousin. She had been siphoning money long before Ethan realized it. She had used him as a shield, forged his signature when it suited her, and then turned around to frame me. And now, I had the proof. I stayed up all night compiling everything into a single file, emails, digital timestamps, even video footage from office security showing her accessing Ethan's computer late at night. I knew exactly what to do with it. The next morning, I requested a meeting with the same investor's legal counsel, privately. I walked into that building with calm, deliberate confidence, and placed the flash drive on the table. This, I said, will show you who's really been stealing from you. They watched in silence as the evidence unfolded. Amber's access logs, her shell company payments, her fake email templates. Every line pointed back to her. When the video ended, the lead counsel exhaled sharply. This changes everything. I stood. I don't want the company. I don't want revenge. I just want the truth on record. Do what you need to do. They promised to investigate immediately. As I stepped out of the building, a strange calm washed over me. For the first time in 2 years, I didn't feel like the victim anymore. Later that evening, my phone buzzed. It was Ethan. Amber's gone, he said, his voice hollow. She packed her things and disappeared. The investors froze our accounts. They're launching an investigation. I don't even know where to start. Start by facing what you did, I said quietly. He sighed. You were right about everything. Claire, I'm sorry. If I could undo what I did to you. You can't, I said flatly, but you can live with it. There was a pause. Did you do this? The evidence. I smiled faintly. I didn't do anything. The truth just surfaced. He exhaled shackily. Amber called you last night, didn't she? No, I said. Why? Because she left a note. It said, tell Claire she wins. I froze. What? But before I could ask more, he said quietly, she also mentioned something else. Something about one last move she made. I don't know what it means. My pulse quickened. What did she say exactly? He hesitated. She wrote, if I'm going down, I'm taking her with me. And before I could respond, there was a knock at my door. When I opened it, 2 uniformed officers were standing there. Immerse. Matthews? One of them said, holding out a document. We have a warrant to search your property in connection with the E&A investigation. As the officers stepped inside and began opening drawers and boxes, I realized Amber's final move wasn't to destroy Ethan. It was aimed directly at me. And for the first time since my plan began, I wasn't sure if I was still the one in control. The two officers stepped into my apartment with polite detachment, but every sound, the rip of the warrant, the squeak of their gloves, the soft shuffle of boxes, felt deafening. Maris. Matthews, one said calmly. We received a tip that some of the missing company funds were transferred through your personal accounts. We just need to verify a few things. For a moment, I couldn't move. My mind spun, replaying Amber's last message to Ethan. If I'm going down, I'm taking her with me. It all made sense now. Amber's revenge wasn't complete until she dragged me into the mud with her. I think there's been a mistake, I managed to say. I don't have access to their accounts. I haven't in years. The officer nodded politely. That may be true, ma'am. But the transactions we're investigating originated from an account under your name, or at least, one created using your identity. I froze. My identity. Amber had every piece of my old data, the company records, my email, even my tax documents from when we ran E&A together. It would have been child's play for her to open a dummy account using my credentials. As they searched, I watched them pull my external drives, check my laptop, open drawers. My pulse hammered against my ribs. Every click, every zipper, every folder they touched made me feel smaller. Finally, after what felt like hours, they gathered their files and left with polite nods. Thank you for cooperating, ma'am, one said. You'll be contacted for a statement soon. When the door shut, I sank to the floor. My carefully constructed calm, the one I'd worn since returning to Ethan's world, cracked. Amber had just turned me into her scapegoat. I called Ethan immediately. She did this, I said the second he picked up. She's framing me now. I know, he said, his voice strained. The investors just sent me a notice. They found another shell account in your name. It looks bad, Claire. I tried to tell them it's fake, but I cut him off. Ethan, where is she? I don't know. Her phone's off. Her apartment's empty. She vanished. I closed my eyes, anger surging hot in my chest. Then I'll find her. Claire. No, I snapped. She burned your company, stole from me, and now she's trying to bury us both. I'm not letting her win. For the next 48 hours, I barely slept. I went through every record, every contact, every supplier Amber had worked with. Then I remembered something. Months ago, when she first joined E&A, she'd mentioned a sister who lived in Milwaukee. She had laughed and said she sometimes stayed there to clear her head. I took a chance. I drove there. The house was small, neat, and quiet, a far cry from Amber's usual luxury. Her sister answered the door, eyes wary. Amber isn't here, she said immediately. I haven't seen her in days. But her nervous tone told me otherwise. I softened my voice. Please, she's in trouble. If she doesn't come forward, she'll drag me down with her. The woman hesitated. Then, finally, she sighed and motioned for me to wait. A minute later, Amber appeared at the hallway's end, pale, disheveled, eyes rimmed red. She looked nothing like the polished woman who'd stolen my life. Claire, she whispered, you shouldn't have come. I took a slow step forward. Why? Scared I might ruin your next lie. She gave a bitter laugh. You already ruined everything. Ethan's company is gone. The investors are gone. And now the cops think I'm a criminal. What else do you want? I want my name cleared, I said sharply. You framed me, Amber. You used my identity to move those funds. I have evidence of your cousin's involvement, the same cousin who ran those shell accounts. Do you really think you can walk away from this? Her expression shifted, from defiance to fear. You don't understand, she said, her voice trembling. I never meant for this to go so far. I thought if I pinned a few things on you, they'd back off me. I panicked. Panicked? I repeated. You forged emails. You stole money. You tried to destroy me. Tears welled in her eyes. You already destroyed me when you came back. He was slipping away, Claire. You think I didn't see it? Every time he looked at you, I knew he still loved you. Her confession hit me like a blow. Loved me? I whispered. He told me once, Amber said bitterly. He said he'd never stop caring about you. I couldn't compete with that. I swallowed hard. So instead of walking away, you decided to burn everything? She stared at me, shaking her head slowly. You're not as innocent as you think, Claire. You came back to ruin him. You wanted revenge. I just beat you to it. For a second, we both stood in silence, two broken women, bound by the same man and the same ruin. Amber, I said softly, you can still fix this. Turn yourself in. Tell them the truth. Her face hardened. And spend years in prison? No. I'm not going down alone. Then she stepped closer, eyes cold and glinting. You think you've won, Claire? The minute I vanish, every piece of evidence I planted will fall on you. The accounts, the transactions, they're all in your name. The world will see you as a jealous ex who tried to destroy her husband's company. You'll be the villain, not me. I felt my hands tremble, not from fear, but fury. You're sick, I whispered. She smirked faintly. Maybe. But I'm free. And before I could respond, she brushed past me and disappeared out the back door. That was the last time I ever saw her. A week later, the police concluded their investigation. The data I had provided to the investors' council proved critical. It showed Amber had used my credentials to create false accounts and transfer funds. They traced the IP addresses, all from her devices. The charges against me were dropped. Ethan's company, however, was officially dissolved. Amber was charged in absentia and declared a fugitive. When it was all over, I stood alone on the steps of the courthouse feeling empty. I'd won, but it didn't feel like victory. Ethan approached me quietly. He looked older, broken, stripped of all that charming arrogance. Claire, he said softly, you saved me. I shook my head. No, Ethan. I saved myself. He looked away, guilt clouding his features. I lost everything. I gave a small, sad smile. So did I. The difference is, I learned to live without it. There was silence. Then he said, do you think you could ever forgive me? I looked at him, the man I once built my world around, the man who'd shattered it, and the man who now stood in the wreckage with nothing left. No, I said quietly, but I hope someday I can forget you. And I walked away. 6 months later, I opened my own design firm, a small, independent studio named Phoenix Interiors. The logo was simple, a bird rising from ashes. My first big client came from a referral, the very same investor who'd once doubted me. They said they admired how I'd handled myself through the chaos. Funny, I thought. Out of destruction, I'd built something stronger. Sometimes, late at night, I still thought about Amber, whether she was hiding somewhere under a new name or looking over her shoulder every day, waiting for the knock at her door. And sometimes I thought about Ethan, probably still blaming himself, still wondering how it all fell apart. But me? I was finally free. Not because I'd won, but because I'd stopped needing revenge to feel alive. They both taught me something priceless. Love can blind you. Betrayal can break you. But revenge will set you free only if you survive it. Teachant.